I read 4 pieces of nonfiction in February, and one of them was a 5-star read. So let's see what I read in February. The first book I read is a book called A Man Without a Face by Masha Gessen, and this is an early biography of Vladimir Putin written by a Russian on the ground during his rise to power when he was working with the mayor of St. Petersburg and how he got into the highest echelons of Russian power. It's a really interesting book to read now because it is slightly dated, but Gessen really did identify a lot of really interesting things at the time of writing this book. Next, I read a book called His Truth is Marching On by John Meacham, who's a historian I've been wanting to read forever, and this was my first Meacham book, and I have to say it fell a little short for me, not because John Lewis's life wasn't interesting, it was just the execution of this book. Even though the writing was really good, the story was interesting, and obviously John Lewis's life was why I was reading it. I was expecting a little bit more from Meacham, and I am sure he has other books. This is probably not one of his highly rated ones, I suppose, but either way, it was an interesting introduction into John Lewis's life, but I'm definitely going to have to do a little bit more reading and read a different John Meacham book. The next book I read was my 5-star read for the month, and that book was called The Situation Room by George Stephanopoulos, and this was our February pick for the Presidential Biography Book Club, and we loved it. It was such a fun read. I did this half physically, half on audio, and I'm really glad I did both because the audio has the actual interviews of the people that he cites in the book. So you hear their voices and it just sort of envelops you into feeling like you're listening to George have these interviews with them. So if you're interested in reading about the presidency in a totally different way, you have to read this book. And finally, I rounded out the month with a book called The Secret State by Jan Karski. And this is a personal point of view of the Polish underground resistance during the Second World War through one man's experience. And it was a really interesting experience, a good way for me to kick off my reading about Polish history this year, but also just to read more perspectives about what it was like for the Polish resistance during the Second World War. Those are the 4 books that I read in February. Let me know what your favorite read from February was. And if you have anything awesome coming up in March, I'll see you guys in the comments.